In this video, we will show you how to replace your engine radiator on this Lincoln Navigator. This will be located along the front of your engine compartment. Let's get into it. Okay friends, let's get started on our job. First, make sure that the cooling system is cool to the touch. Come right over here to the reservoir and turn that cap counterclockwise, lifting it up and away from your face. Give it a quick inspection. And then typically I just rest this right back on here, leaving it loose. Now let's make our way underneath the passenger side front of the vehicle. You can easily access the lower drain on the radiator from just inside of the passenger side wheel well. Now for this, you want to make sure you have hand and eye protection at all times, of course. You'll notice along the passenger side, you have the drain port. To divert the coolant into our coolant receptacle, I'm going to put a little hose on here. Continue on with a 19mm wrench to loosen this nut. Allow the coolant to drain. Once that's done draining, go ahead and close that coolant drain. Now let's make our way up along here. We're going to remove the jack handle. For this, you'll find it's held in place with a couple of clips. Go ahead and give it a little tug. Set that aside. With that out of the way, let's continue on to removing our plastic trim panel. That makes its way all the way from one side of the vehicle to the other. You'll find holding this down, you have several push clips. We'll start from this side right here. On these clips right here, there should be a little center tab that you can generally pry up out of there with a flathead screwdriver or use a Phillips head to loosen it up. As you can tell, once you have the center dislodged, it becomes unlocked, and then you can remove it. We'll do the same down the line. Once those are out of there, we'll continue on a little bit further towards the engine. You'll find two more. Remove your trim panel. Now that we have that out of the way, let's continue on to the hose that connects to the top of the radiator. Squeeze the clamp, slide it up, remove the hose from the radiator. Set that aside. Let's move along to removing our air filter housing. For this, you'll find that you have an 8mm headed clamp. You can also use a flathead screwdriver for this. Loosen the clamp just enough that you can remove the hose. Once you have that off of there, we'll continue on to the clamp that holds the two air filter housing pieces together. Separate this. On the bottom of this area, there will be some wiring that leads to your mass airflow sensor. Be careful not to damage it, but we do need to get this out of the way. We'll leave that in place and set this aside. Move along to your air temp sensor. Where my thumb is, there's a small squeeze tab. Squeeze that in. Go ahead and pull that wiring right off of there. Every time you disconnect an electrical connector, take a peek. If you see any funny colors, that's corrosion and it would need to be dealt with. Now we can make our way up here to this tube. Go ahead and grab onto that and separate it. Quick inspection, set it aside. Make your way up along the front here. We'll pull these cables out of place. Follow this up to where it connects onto the intake. We'll continue loosening this clamp using our 8mm socket or flathead screwdriver. Grab onto this, give it a little wiggle, and remove it from the engine. Set it aside. Continue on to your upper radiator hose. We'll squeeze the clamp, slide it up the hose, remove the hose from the radiator. Once you get that off of there, just give it a quick squeeze. Make sure it's still soft and pliable and it's not torn, worn, or damaged in any way. Assuming it looks good, set it aside. The next thing that we will want to do is make our way down to where the fan clutch connects onto the water pump. For the fan clutch, you're going to have to use a 36mm. We'll turn this counterclockwise to remove it from the water pump. This will be easiest using a fan clutch removal tool. Now we can start unscrewing this. Now before I fully unscrew this, we'll continue on to removing the two 8mm headed bolts that hold the fan shroud to the radiator. Do the same on the other side. Alright, now at this point we can continue unscrewing the fan from the water pump. When you do this, be extremely careful that it does not fall down and potentially hit up against the radiator. Now while that's unscrewed, let's continue on by removing the fan shroud and the fan assembly at the same time. Slide this up a little bit. Remove the fan and the clutch. Now that we have that out of the way, let's continue on to removing the fan shroud from the vehicle as well. With that out of the way, let's continue on over to the driver's side of the radiator. You're going to find that you have two transmission lines. Use a 16mm wrench to remove each of the transmission lines from the radiator. It's a good idea to put a collection bucket under this area. To gain access to where the lower hose connects onto the radiator, we're going to have to make our way inside of the front wheel well. Now let's get this fender liner out of the way. For this, there should be two 7mm headed bolts down underneath the corner of the bumper. Ours are missing. We'll continue on using a trim tool up inside this area. You'll find two push tabs. Remove each of them. Take hold of that fender liner and slide it aside. Now once you slide that out of the way, we're going to pay attention in this area here. You can tell that there's a little slot cut out of this area, and there's also a metallic locking tab right where my pick is. We need to take this tab and peen it up and away from the radiator and towards the radiator hose. Once you've done that, you can take this hose, turn it counterclockwise to remove it from the radiator. We're going to grab onto the hose and turn it counterclockwise until it feels as though it stops. Once it's done that, you can continue on by carefully using a pry bar in between the frame and the hose and gently pulling it out of position. Now that we have that lower radiator hose off of there, just go ahead and give this a quick inspection and set it aside. All right, we're at the point that we can start dismounting the radiator from the body of the vehicle. For this, you're going to find that you have two 10mm headed bolts, one holding each radiator bracket in place. Remove that, do the same to the other. At this point, you can take hold of that radiator and gently lift it up and away from your vehicle. As you do, be extremely careful for the AC condenser located directly in front of it. There it is, friends. All right, friends, let's get ready to install our brand new radiator. Before you put this down into the vehicle, go ahead and check that drain. We'll grab onto this and make sure it's nice and snug. Now we can continue on by sliding this into place. As you do, pay attention to the bottom mounting points. You're going to have one on each side and they need to fit into their corresponding rubber mounts. Should feel this drop right in. Once you have the lower aspect in place, continue on up along the top. Snug them up. Make sure the radiator is completely secured. Let's make our way back into that driver's side wheel well. We're going to reattach the lower radiator hose to the radiator. You'll find on the radiator you have two rubber O-rings. Lubricate those. You can lubricate these just using a little bit of brand new engine coolant. Now we can start putting the lower hose onto the radiator. You remember, as we were taking this off, we had to turn it counterclockwise before pulling it off. So to put it on, we'll start by coming counterclockwise, bring it in, and then turn it clockwise until our alignment pin lines up with its corresponding hole. Now once you have this in place, make sure that the tab is pinned down in between this area. That way there you're sure that it's completely locked into place. Now we can continue on to putting on our sealing O-rings for each of the transmission lines. You'll find with your kit it came with two, one for each transmission line. Take that and put it directly into the adapter. With that in place, you can continue on to your transmission line. We'll start this in by hand so we're sure we do not cross-thread it into the radiator. Once you have it in by hand, continue on tightening it with your 16mm wrench. Right there's where it feels as though it bottomed out. I'll just take it a little bit further so I'm sure it's nice and tight. Do the same exact thing to your other transmission line. Now we can continue on to our 2 mounting clips for the fan shroud. We'll put these directly into the radiator. There's one. All right, now we can start putting our fan shroud back into place. We're just going to slide this in a little bit because we do still have to put the fan in here as well. Continue on with your fan and fan clutch. We'll put this into position. As we slide this down, be extremely careful not to damage your radiator. Let's grab these cables out of here. Continue bringing the fan and the fan shroud down into its original position. Once you feel as though you have the fan shroud in its original positioning, continue on to the fan clutch. We'll start that onto the water pump by hand. It can be a little bit hard to get this started, but once you catch the first groove, you should be good. There we are. Bottom it out. Once you have it bottomed out by hand, continue on snugging it with your fan clutch tool. Just a couple taps should do it. Start each of them in and then snug them up. Reconnect your upper radiator hose. Squeeze the clamp, put it in its original position. Make sure that's completely secured. Let's connect the hose for our coolant reservoir to the top driver's side of the radiator. Slide that all the way into position and put your clamp in position as well. Make sure it's secure. Let's continue on to our air intake system. Slide this into position on the throttle body. Once you're sure it's pressed all the way in, continue on to tightening your 8mm headed clamp. It's important to make sure each of these clamps are secured so no dirty or unmetered air makes its way into the engine. We'll put our cables back into position. As we slide this into place, make sure that you have the mass airflow sensor wiring facing down. Before we tighten this clamp, let's continue putting the two areas of the air filter housing together. You can twist this as needed. Align the top area along here. You can tell that you have a tab on one side and a little carved out area on the other. Once you have those aligned, you should be able to squeeze them together and put the clamp into the locked position. Now we can continue on to our clamp. Make sure that's completely secured together. We'll move along to our air temp sensor. Press that in, listen for a click, give it a tug to make sure that's secure. Move along to your breather hose. We'll slide that into position. As always, double check it as well. Reinstall your front trim panel and install all of your push clips. For each of the push clips, you want to make sure that you press in the outer portion first, and then continue on by locking it in position with the center. Do the same to all. Now that we have the trim panel on there, let's continue on to our jack handle. We'll slide this into position. There we are. All right, now it's time to fill our cooling system. Go ahead and remove that cover. Now, if you were to look along the passenger side of the coolant reservoir, you're going to be able to find an area where it tells you cold maximum. Has a line coming across here. We're going to go ahead and fill up the cooling system up to that line. After that, we can start up the vehicle and let it run for a little while, making sure that we burp out any air from in the system. To do this, you can either use a funnel up along the top and put some in there, or you can use a coolant filling device. There we are. Once the coolant level is in the proper position, continue on to reinstalling your coolant cap. At this point, you want to go ahead and start up the vehicle. Let it run for a little while. What you'll find is that the coolant will start burping out any air from inside the system. Keep checking that fluid level. Make sure it's up to par. If you need to add, go ahead and add some and keep it at that maximum line. Now, while the vehicle's running and you're on a smooth level surface, once it's at the normal operating temperature, you're going to want to make sure you check your transmission fluid level as well. Now, our vehicle is off right now, so you can hear me talk. But essentially, if it was running and at normal operating temperature on a smooth level surface, we'll come over here to the transmission dipstick. You want to lift that up and out of there and give it a quick wipe. Now that I have that cleaned off, I want to show you this area along here. This is the chart. When you're at normal operating temperature, you should be up inside this hatched area, never above it. If it looks like you're low, down near the tip of the dipstick, go ahead and add a little Mercon transmission fluid. Once you're sure it's at the proper level, go ahead and reinstall that dipstick. Okay friends, we've got the truck back together. At this point, you can go ahead and close the hood and take it for a road test. Make sure you have plenty of heat coming out of the vents and the transmission shifts properly. Aside from that, thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.